The Film Department is supported by UNLV Film. At the Film Department of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, every story has a beginning. With degree programs for undergraduates and graduates, state-of-the-art equipment and facilities, incredible professional internships around the world, and expert guest speakers, students discover the power and potential of cinema as they prepare for the film and television industry and beyond. Learn more at unlv.edu/film. UNLV Film. Find your voice, tell your story.
Welcome to the Film Department, the movie review podcast of UNLV Film. This semester, we'll be discussing the film screening at our partner movie house, the Beverly Theater, Las Vegas's only independent film house and performance venue. I'm Nick Patrick, a third-year film major and your host for this episode, and I'm joined by...
I'm Annie. I'm a fourth-year film major at UNLV with an emphasis in production design.
And I am Elle, a fifth year over here at UNLV Film Program with a specification in film history and screenwriting.
Awesome. Happy to be here, guys. How are we doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Doing good.
Comfort of our homes today.
In the comfort of our homes today. Yeah.
It's amazing. I can see you guys right here in front of me, but I just can't.
I know.
Not same space.
Soon we'll have the VR and we'll be able to just
be in each other's rooms during
and we
this.
can even be in the audience's rooms.
We're right there with them.
Yeah, restraining orders. Before we get into this week's very special interview, I kind of want to talk about an article that I recently saw on the Hollywood Reporter where Maier Hawke claimed that some producers in the industry actually are using Instagram followers and other social media presences as a requirement to be casted. Basically saying that you have to have a certain amount of followers to be casted, and if you don't, the other cast members have to have a certain amount to make up for it. How do you guys feel about that? Is that obviously it's not very ethical.
Face is making me laugh.
I'm sorry. I couldn't contain it.
Tell us your thoughts, Elle.
I don't like that at all. I mean, I'm kind of the same. Maier Hawke within this article, I'm reading it a bit. It's one of the first things that she's quoted up saying is what I always wanted to be is an actor where the work is what the draw is, not the personhood. And I think along the lines of that is very fair to say. Of course, there's always think about casting people that are good people and such. I just think when it comes to the whole idea of followers, it seems like such a stretch. It becomes this whole game of who's the most popular contest? Raise a hand, rather than this person has good acting performances. They have a good way of how to display the character. Now you have to throw in a popularity contest in the mix of that. I don't like that.
And I don't think social media followers is an indicator that people are going to go to the theater.
Absolutely.
I mean, I believe it was Dua Lipa was in Argyle. I didn't see Dua Lipa fans go see Argyle. I didn't see, Omar Apollo fans, all the Omar Apollo fans go see Queer. It was still a very small art house film. And I think that's a completely wrong way of going about it. And what's even crazier is not even nepotism can save Maier Hawke, the daughter, it's crazy. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, the fact that Maier Hawke out of everyone is the first one to talk about this publicly when she has two of the most famous parents in the world. Very interesting. But...
Just unbelievable. Another wonderful little thing that these producers in Hollywood are doing to try and make a quick buck, rather than focus on the art.
Only good news at the Film Department podcast.
Only good news at the Film Department podcast. Today we are joined by Berenice Chavez, a Los Angeles-based editor and UNLV alum. She received her MFA in film editing from AFI in 2016 and has gone on to edit multiple short-form and long-form documentaries. Her most recent works are PAMELA, A Love Story, Into the Fire and Come See Me in the Good Light, which won audience favorite at this year's Sundance. Annie, would you mind telling us a little bit more about those films?
Of course. So Into the Fire is a short-form miniseries on Netflix. It documents the story of Kathy Turkanian searching for her missing birth daughter in 1989. We also have Pamela, A Love Story from 2023, which follows Pam Anderson as she recalls the highs and lows of her career through her perspective. And then Come See Me in the Good Light, which just premiered at Sundance and, like you said, won audience favorite, which is the story of two poets, Andrea Gibson and her partner Megan Falley, as they navigate life after discovering Andrea's incurable diagnosis.
I would just love to kind of just jump right into it and kind of talk about like the documentary process as a whole. Considering a lot of documentaries are interview based and not scripted narratives, I'd imagine it's kind of hard to have a solid plan of like what the documentary is going to look like until you get to post-production. So how does the creative collaboration look between like you and the other editors and the director during post-production?
I want to say for, at least in my experience, it's been, like the director will come to you and say, this is what I see the film being. And then, once they start shooting, things obviously change, especially as you get into the edit. You just kind of like start to evolve the story based on what they're actually getting. Like for example, this film that was at Sundance, Come See Me in the Good Light, we thought it was going to be about Andrea Gibson's cancer journey and just about them, but then we realized it was actually a love story about Andrea and their partner Megan. So then it was just like, we were like, oh, this is a love story. It's not about dying. It's not it's not a sad story. It was so funny and they're both so funny. And that's kind of when we realized, like, it's one of those things where it's just like, it's not what we thought it was going to be as they kept shooting and as we were editing. And a lot of this is trust too with the director. It's just Ryan White, the director who I've worked with in the past for a couple projects. He at this point just like really trusted me to kind of take over and create the story. If it changes, it changes. And sometimes we don't have an ending. Like with Andrea, we actually thought that they were going to die and they didn't. Thankfully, because we fell in love with them, we're like, luckily it wasn't that story. It wasn't about their death, and so it was just like finding the ending since Andrea was still alive, and the same with other films, like with Pamela, we just thought it was going to be an ending of her coming around and realizing her life, but then as they were shooting, it was like, oh, she got Chicago, and so then it became about that. And same with like Into the Fire, as as we were shooting, it was like about we luckily ended up getting Kathleen Doyle's aunt to interview, and she had never spoken up about her niece's death. And we were like, oh, this is going to change the story in a great way. But it's usually that. It's like you come into the documentary and it's an idea, but then it just changes from there. It's never... You just kind of know it's never going to be the same. And working with other editors, especially in Pamela, it was when I worked with another editor, and she had a totally different style, and I had more of like she had more of like a crazy in your face type of editing type of style, and then I had more of a slow, sentimental editing. But it kind of worked because we were able to realize that as we were working together, and she was like, let me do the Baywatch sequence where it's just like flashy and like this. And I was more like, let me do the love story of Pamela and Tommy, where it's more slow and sweet. And And that's kind of also when I realized, like working with other editors, I also realized like my style of editing. And so it's good for me, especially for other jobs, to be able to be like, this film sounds like you want it to be like crazy editing, and that's not really my style. So it's helpful for all of us
That's
to
kind
know
of
that.
cool. A yin yang kind of situation kind
Yeah,
of came out of it. Yeah, and you kind
yeah,
of got to discover, your style and your voice.
yeah, definitely.
It's amazing.
When it comes to, being able to experience these things as an editor, when you're like having all this material in front of you, especially since so much changes, as you said during on your time, how's it feel to experience that? Being able to come in with a distinct feeling of, oh, this is probably where it's going to go, but then having that whole thing turn around it. Because I remember watching, into the fire. And I was like, oh, I know this is where this is going to go. And then so many parts being so shocked and absolutely flabbergasted at so many different turns. I was like, I found myself being like, no, this can't be. But how does that feel like for you to experience?
I mean, I want to say it feels satisfying, when I'm like, especially when I'm like, as I'm editing, and then I do like a, where I'm, where I just come in and I have this idea, and I'm just like, well, what if we like have this story in our film come really later, and it feels like a holy crap, type of moment. And then when I send it to the director and he kind of confirms that, it feels really, really good for me as an editor, because I'm just like, okay, cool, let's do this more then, where, um, especially in editing, it's a lot of like, when do we want to reveal these moments, like Into the Fire, Kathy's guilt. We could have easily put it up at the front so people right away could be like, well, why does she, because we did get that, we got feedback a lot about like, well, why does she care about her daughter that she put up for adoption? So then we're like, well, what if we have this guilt, but when would it feel like satisfying for viewers to hear her guilt? So we were like, well, what if it's right after she gets all this like information of like the classmates that she had, of the abuse, of everything. And it's, those moments are really like satisfying once you like hear that people are really feeling them where they're coming in. So that's what it usually feels like for me. I'm just like, great, this is amazing.
I think us as an audience can feel that too, because I was very much held emotionally captive, especially seeing all of her former classmates give some like unfortunate details. And I was just like, wow, that just hurt. And then having the perspective of, gosh, I'm forgetting her name, but she was kidnapped. And then when they looked back at the photo, being like, that is the exact same guy I remember. I was like, whoa. And it was
Yeah.
her it was her adopted father. And I was like, whoa, that's so much. And I think that was captured so beautifully through just the tone and pace.
Thank you.
Something that I'm really curious about, because a lot of your films are very character driven, and I think that as an editor you seem to latch towards very like character driven stories. What's it like balancing like subjectivity and objectivity for you as an editor?
I would say I do tend to gravitate more towards character-driven films, just because I feel like it's more easier to bring out the sentiment, which I think for me is what's important in a documentary film. What really like captivates people into seeing. And I think that's one of the things we really got with like Into the Fire too, because it was more of it wasn't your typical true crime, because it did focus more on the sentiment of the mother, of the aunt, it's, so for me, that's one of the things that's really important when I say yes to a film. Like, I don't want, like I did an interview recently for a film, but it just wasn't, for me, it didn't feel like it would have emotion, because it just felt very like I was saying, just felt very like flashy, very like let's look back on this cool thing that we used to have back in that day. But it just wasn't character driven. It wasn't, my, like, I love to put like my whole heart into a film, and I hope it shows.
Yeah.
Shows.
Definitely.
It really does.
Come See Me in the Good Light. It's like, I wish I could have given you guys that access to that film, but it's one of the ones where I feel like it really showed my style, just because it's this love story and a lot of emotion, and like you're really like feeling what both of these amazing people are feeling, and like I fell in love with both of them, and when I got to meet them at Sundance, I just like wanted to cry, and they wanted to cry meeting me too, and it was for me that's really important, that when I say yes to a documentary, I feel like I can't just say yes to anything, just because that feels like I know I can bring as much as I can to those type of films. I don't know if that answers your
No, that
question.
does. That does. And it really highlights how empathetic I think your editing style is. And especially because when I watch Pamela, A Love Story, I feel like that's probably one of the most like empathetic lights we had ever seen Pam Anderson in. And it's pretty awesome now to hear that is in a lot of favor to your guys' filmmaking and to your style of editing as well. So thank you for answering that.
And speaking to that, I just love to ask, because you went through UNLV from 2008 to 2013, if that is to be said correctly.
Yeah.
Would you say that your time in the program was what shaped that sort of perspective? Because I was looking into it. I ended up possibly finding one of the first documentaries you worked on, which was Passing the Torch. And I watched that. It was on this one link over on Vimeo, and I was watching it, and it's the Holocaust. And would you say that your time with that in UNLV would that inspire you, or did you come to that along the way after the program through like work with different colleagues or different mentors?
I mean, I want to say that I probably didn't realize it until later on in my career that that's kind of what did inspire me, but I think it did start at UNLV. Like Brett luckily gave me the opportunity to edit Passing the Torch, and I edited this short film too about my cousins, and and I think it was just, they were both very sentimental films, and I credit Brett Levner a lot to that, like maybe she saw it and I didn't, and it was just something that kind of like worked out, and then I just kind of realized it later on as I was working more and more on films, or even as an assistant editor. I've mostly done like sentimental films, and I would get attached even though I was just like on the side helping the editor. I think there was like one film where it was just like a biopic of Leonard Skinner, and it was like fun to work on it, but it wasn't sentimental, obviously. It wasn't like a character driven film. It was just like this biopic of them, but it was, I think that's the only one that wasn't. I mean, like, even like I was an associate editor on Goodnight Oppie, which is the one about the Mars rover, and that one was very sentimental in a weird way. And even then, I was just like, "Oh, I'm falling in love with this robot," So I don't think I realized it, but it definitely started back.
I know, and that makes so much sense when it comes to the Mars robot. I remember hearing about the story when I was a few years ago. I fell in love with him too.
Yeah.
So I completely understand.
At UNLV, I mean, there's such a massive film community, and Come See Me in the Good Light is your latest collaboration with Ryan White. And I was curious because because I think a lot of students are wondering this too with their fellow classmates and stuff. What is the value of kind of finding a collaborator that you love working with, and how does that impact your work and your drive to each project?
I mean, I want to say, as an editor, I've mostly worked with Ryan White, so I think it's been mostly because we both realized we do have the same style. Like, he's a very character-driven director, and he's very sentimental too. You know, like even the Mars Rover one, you know, the Goodnight Oppie one, it's about a robot, but it's character-driven by this robot, you know, and then everyone around Oppie is telling, you know, Oppie's story. So I think it's definitely important to have someone that you have similar styles with, especially when it comes to documentary, because you want to do justice to your, I hate calling them subjects, but I guess they're subjects because the characters feels weird. But, you know, you want to do justice to these people that you're following for however months or a year, whatever it is. So it's important to have similar styles with your director. You know, sometimes it might not work out. I know I've heard of editors getting fired, but it's more of like you're just not the right fit. I've just been lucky that Ryan and I have a similar style, and I think that's also why I reject projects too if they don't feel like they're my style, because I'm like, I'm not gonna do your film justice, and you know your film is precious to you, and I want to make sure I give you that. So just because I know my style now, I know that I can say, I'm sorry, it's not gonna work out. But I don't know if that answered it.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you have to love the project, and you have to love who you're working with, and to do like what you said, to do it justice. So that makes complete sense. Yeah. And I think I hope a lot of students, and like upcoming independent filmmakers, follow through with that, you know, and stick with what they love.
Yeah,
and only do that.
And not only doing the story justice, but also the subjects that you are, you know, highlighting, because I do think that that's so important for your style and for your stories themselves. Another thing, when I watched PAMELA, and then I was looking on Letterboxd, and one of the top comments, someone had said that you guys had highlighted a strong woman telling her story through her own words and her own terms. And I feel like that perfectly encapsulates that idea of justice through documentary filmmaking. And I just would like to know what that idea means to you.
That's great to hear. I tend to avoid stuff like that, like reading comments, and just because sometimes I'm like, oh, this is gonna make me mad. Like Into the Fire, there were so many with like people judging Kathy, and I was like, this is making me mad, and I'm tempted to comment, and
because you've been with them for so long, I assume, as an editor in the project.
Yeah, definitely. And it's you know, it's like with Come See Me in the Good Light, you know, when we showed the film to Andrea and Meg, I remember Andrea I heard back from the director, and they were like, from Ryan White, and Ryan was like, you know, Andrea just really loved the film, and they felt like we really captured not just like them, but also Meg, and you know, just hearing that is really, really, really nice. Or like even from like a lot of their friends were producers on the film, and they all were like, yeah, this is totally our friends, you know, you guys really capture. So it's so nice to hear that, because you are wanting to tell the best film that you can, but you're also wanting to do justice to who they truly are. And then sometimes in wanting to make the best film, you might forget that, you know, that these are people that are going to see the film, you know, like, for example, we're like, Andrea was like a little bit sensitive, you know, with some topics, so we just had to like tread lightly with like some of the the stuff that we were saying. So, you know, when they saw the film, it was kind of like, okay, we got feedback on this, so we probably should reconsider some of the things on it.
I feel like having that, seeing as film collaborators come together, depicting, there's always that like that bubble of seeing them and wanting to be authentic, and provide authenticity to their experiences, and uh, regarding sensitive material, because some of these ones that you're working on have such sensitive things with it, especially within like a Into the Fire, we're dealing with cold murder case, and dealing with very sensitive, perhaps even what people could consider taboo topics. How would you say you as collaborators go about just making sure that um, to go to these places with authenticity, but with society in mind, and also these people in mind, and how do you juggle all that together?
I mean, yeah, with Into the Fire was definitely tricky. You know, we did have lawyers in that film, and where, like, you know, we'd send them a cut and they'd be like, okay, this is problematic because it might seem like this person is saying, like, Brenda is saying this, and you want to avoid getting sued by Brenda, because we don't, if it's like speculation versus facts. We were lucky enough to have lawyers, but then, we were always, like with Kathleen Doyle, we personally didn't want to show any crime scene photos, even though we did have access to them. We wanted to respect Kathleen Doyle's family. We wanted to respect Kathy's wishes, so it's definitely juggling a lot of that, even though some of it were like, oh, some people would really love to see this, but we were like, morally, this is probably the best choice for the film. Or like PAMELA, there's the whole situation with Tommy where we couldn't legally say, what she did say in her interview. So we just kind of showed a graphic of like, Tommy was arrested or whatever. I forget what it was, but and then we had to legally show him denying that anything happened. So it's one of those things where you're just like, well, I'm on her side, So, but legally we had to like show the other side too, just to kind of balance that. And so it's tricky, and you always want to go with your person's side, but sometimes you do have to kind of consider every situation.
That's tough. That's a tough position to be put in, especially having to worry about being sued over such things.
I wanted to ask about just your career journey as a whole. You had mentioned that you were assistant editor on a few projects. How did your transition from UNLV to AFI look? And then how did, getting your MFA kind of take you into the industry?
Yeah, I guess after UNLV, I didn't really know what to do. I'm more of like an introvert, and then I like discovered the film department really late in my undergrad career, so I didn't have much time to network within UNLV. But I was like constantly asking Brett Levner for advice, and she was like, well, what about grad school? And I applied to a few. I applied to AFI and I got in, and at the time I wanted to do scripted, so I did the 2 years at AFI, and then after AFI, I struggled a bit to find my first job, but it was an AFI alumni that gave me my first assistant job. And she's a big producer now, and she's still like reaching out to me for jobs, and she's amazing. And it was thanks to her that I was able to do my first assisting job. And then, it was with a great editor who had worked with Brian White. and she did The Keepers with Ryan, and then from there I like kind of just I was assistant on a few other projects, and then Ryan's company reached out to me. They needed an assistant, and from there I was able to grow. Well, I had done an independent film, I should say, with the first producer that gave me my first assistant job, and then I showed it to the producer with Ryan's company just because she was like, I saw you're going to Tribeca with this film. Like, I would love to see it. So I gave it to her, and with Ryan's company, I was able to grow. And then, the Goodnight Oppie film, they gave me assistant. They raised my credit from assistant to associate editor. And then they were like, what do you think about editing on PAMELA doc? And I was like, great. That sounds fun. And then from there, I've just been with Brian White's company until this last project.
You've had an amazing career in such a short amount of time, it feels.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
I think it's only gonna continue to grow. And I want to ask one thing too. Is there a dream project or subject or even like a completely different role other than editor that you want to explore in the future?
I think my dream project would be something with like undocumented people. I don't know what that is, but I'm just like, I think I was actually talking with another editor about this because I was asking her if she would ever, there's so many editors that are considering directing. And so I was kind of asking her about this, and she was like, I don't know. And I'm kind of in that same boat where I'm more comfortable sitting at my desk behind a computer, and but I think if the right project were to fall on my lap and it would be something that I'm passionate about, then I'd consider it. But I'd also consider just being an editor on it.
Honestly, I'd say that for when you were speaking about your experience in undergrad at UNLV, I myself felt very, that's what I'm experiencing. I feel sometimes I'm just not the most person to put myself out there, put myself forward. I know that I do like a certain class, but I just never have really gotten to that stage of being able to connect as much as other people through like the program. So for people kind of like me who find themselves like, I don't know exactly how to go about this, what to do, what advice would you give to those that really are kind of struggling to get themselves out there and put their selves forward when they get so in their head about these things?
I would say just do it. I had to like force myself to just do it just because I was kind of intimidated. There were so many like small film festivals at UNLV when I was there. I don't know if they're still around, but
yeah, we still have like Spring Flicks, 20-hour film fest.
Yeah.
We still have a couple of those going around.
And I remember that they were around, and I would go to them, and I would see a lot of these like films, and like the director would be the writer and the editor. But then I remember I had a classmate who was just like, just go ask that person if you can edit their short film. And I had to I couldn't do it because I'm very shy, and it took me a while to. And then Brett also pushed me to, and I was just like, hey, if you ever have a short film, I love the work that you do. Can I be your editor on it? And I was able to like edit a few projects because of that, because I was able to push myself. So I would say, I am sure like a lot of these people would love to collaborate and would love to know what it's like to work with an editor or a producer, whatever it is, because I was intimidated by a lot of these people that I'm like, oh, they just want to do their own work. But, once I actually reached out and asked people if I could be an editor on it, they were totally open to it. And a lot of the times they did reach out when they had something.
That's perfect. That sounds like great advice. I definitely will take that a bit to heart, because I always see people do such great projects. I'm like, oh, I just don't know if I should, because they have their own little thing. But that's thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. It's always the overthinking that makes me be like, no, I can't.
So one, you have your process that you go through. I was just wondering when it comes to assembling the cut, when you're stuck in a particular rut during the editing process, what are some ways you help yourself get out of that and push yourself forward? Or like how do you tackle that?
I want to say, I usually will try to like watch and rewatch that cut, go into the footage and see if maybe like I missed something that might help push me through. If I'm really stuck, I will call the director because again, before I used to be shy and be like, no, I'm gonna figure this out on my own. But then it got to a point where I'm like, I'm just gonna call Ryan and like we'll talk for like 30 minutes trying to figure this out. Because like I think it's me, but then as we're like talking through it, he's like, oh yeah, this is tricky, story wise. So that's usually what I do. I'll jump into the footage, try to make sure that there's not anything I'm missing, especially if it's like a scene related to like a verite scene that's just about that day. But my last resort's like, let me bother the director and get his thoughts on it.
My last question for you is if you have a favorite documentary or a narrative film, and how it, if at all, if it influences your work.
I want to say my favorite documentary is Minding the Gap. It's I think it's because it was just like a sentimental film and I didn't expect it to be, and I just loved how it was like the transition of these three boys, and it was just so beautifully done. And I think, in many ways, maybe that's why it inspires me, because it's not a film that you would think is sentimental, and then it is, and it's just so beautifully done. But yeah, that one's my favorite.
Okay, I do have one, and it is very it's a kind of narrow question, but I'm really curious. We kind of touched on it before, but having archival footage and having filmed footage, I'm really curious as an editor how you balance those two, like how you incorporate photos and videos into these stories and how you utilize that to tell your stories.
I will say I kind of had to learn to use it, but it was more of like it has to feel motivated, it has to feel earned to go into, like a lot of like PAMELA, it had to feel earned to go into these moments of her archival footage, or with Into the Fire, we had to earn going into the interrogation room with like especially since we had so much of it, and that's kind of like what we usually tend to do, is more of like, is it motivated to go to it, or are we just showing you because we're like, look what we have, and that's usually when it wouldn't really work, because it was just like, why am I looking at this footage? Like, yeah, it's cute, but I'm just looking at it. But that's usually the process that I kind of learned to do with Ryan White. It's more, he loves archival footage, and it was just more of like just making sure that it felt earned and motivated, and only that way would it be impactful to see this archival footage.
Berenice, thank you so much for your time today on the Film Department podcast. We are just so excited to see the next thing that you do. Again, we just really appreciate your time. It was so wonderful getting to talk with you and kind of just get to hear your experience in your journey. So thank you.
Thank you. It was great meeting you all.
Thank you so much. It was very lightning.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week's Film Department. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and will like, subscribe, and share wherever you're listening to podcasts. If you'd like to read your host's in-depth analysis of this week's interview and films, head over to our Substack at the Film Department. Thank you to the Beverly, and be sure to check out their latest programming at thebeverly.com. I'm Nick Patrick.
I'm Villareal.
And I'm Annie Rogy.
Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Imagined by the Rogers Foundation, the Beverly Theater brings cinematic connectivity, novel collaborations, live happenings, cultural portals, and a zest for independent spirits to downtown Las Vegas. With a mission to stage uncommon cinematic, literary, and live experiences, the Beverly Theater is Las Vegas's first and only independent film house, storytelling arena, and live music venue. Check out our event calendar at thebeverlytheater.com.